actually over 30 years, 25 years, but it's actually over 30 years. So I was working as a community psychologist with one of the large NGOs for all of that time. So for the first kind of half of my career, I was working in out-of-home care, adoption, child protection. And then the second half of my career, I moved into parenting, counselling, and sort of presenting groups and all of those kinds of things. So I have worked very much in the sector of child protection. Come on in and grab a seat if you need to. Okay, I've worked very much in the pointy end around child protection, domestic violence, family relationships, and I have loved every minute of it. I am so privileged to have had that career. I medically retired prematurely at the end of 2023 because I've got multiple sclerosis and a weird form of arthritis, psoriatic arthritis. And so that just meant that I couldn't work full time in the area. All right, we're going to start talking about the accidental counsellor with one of my favourite quotes, and it's from Brené Brown. And does everybody know Brené Brown? Okay, so for those who don't, she's a social worker in Texas, and she has, and she's a researcher, so she's a social researcher on the human condition, really, and she is possibly one of the wisest and most insightful and humble people that you could ever wish to hear from. If you look her up on YouTube, there are 1,000 videos, and we're going to see one of her little short video a bit later on today. But what she says, this is one of my favourite quotes, is connection is why we're here. It's what gives purpose and meaning to our lives. The power that connection holds in our lives was confirmed when the main concern about connection emerged as the fear of disconnection, the fear that something we have done or failed to do, something about who we are or where we come from has made us unlovable and unworthy of connection. And so when I think about what you were saying about volunteering is all about connection. It's all about, connecting with people and supporting people, which helps them, but it also helps us. And so because we're connecting with people. And there is a beautiful quote by a psychology professor and researcher at UCLA in America. And he says, children are hardwired for connection. So when babies are hardwired for connection. When babies are born, they're born looking for their mother's face. That's what happens, for their father's face, because they are hardwired. We're all hardwired for connection. Okay, so with that in mind, let's start. And what we're going to do is actually it's going to be very interactive today. I'm going to get you to do lots of discussions and small groups and brainstorms and talking, because you really don't need to hear from me for 2.5 hours. So we are going to have lunch, by the way. We are going to have lunch halfway through, just so that you know. So I want to start with a bit of a brainstorm, and I put some butcher's paper up on the wall just so that we can write this down. So, thinking about the accidental counsellor, what are the kind of situations where you feel you need some counselling skills? Let's just start there. Call them out, and I'll write them up on here. What situations do you find yourself in where you need to have some counselling skills?
Obviously, when somebody comes to and asks for advice on something.
Yes, so when somebody comes and asks for advice, yeah? Yeah? What else?
When they're not meeting the expectations, sometimes you have to sort of pull them out aside and see what's going on.
So when they're not, what did you say the very first
Not
thing?
meeting I'm an academic, so I'm talking about students. Like
Yeah.
if they're not meeting the expectations, they might not be the one coming to me.
So when somebody, let's think of a short way of saying that. So when somebody needs to be held accountable, yes. So holding people to account, you have to do that with some very careful skills. Yeah. Other things.
To help someone in need.
Help someone in need, yes.
And there's a conflict.
When there's conflict, yeah.
When someone is going through grief and loss.
Yes. I actually like to say, we always say grief and loss, but I actually always pull myself up on that and say loss and grief. So I always try and remember to flip that to loss and grief. What other things, situations?
To mediate an argument?
To mediate an argument, did you say? Yes. Or even not just an argument. It could be to mediate. So a bit sort of one down from an argument is mediate where people can't get to an agreement, which is a bit different to an argument. Mediate agreements. Because there might not be any conflict or, hard feelings in there, but it might be just we can't find a solution. Yeah,
Together.
that's right. So what other situations that might you come into, be around you?
I think we can be a bit more self-centric and see sometimes we counsel ourselves and
Oh, yes. Counselling ourselves. Has anybody had, that sounds a bit weird, but has anybody had the situation where they've said or they've thought, I need to give myself a jolly good speaking to? That's what we're talking about. It's like counselling ourselves. Yeah. I've had situations where I've had a problem or something and I've gone over it and over it in my head and I thought, even I'm sick of this, I really need to sort this out. Yeah. What other situation?
Young person.
Young people. Yes, and we need lots of skills when we're talking with young people because they really find it quite difficult to connect with adults. They're usually very good at connecting with each other and on social media and those things, but connecting with adults who might actually be able to help them, that's quite tricky for young people. And for children too. So sometimes children really need to have the benefit of our counselling skills. And that's not just professionally, that's just as parents. Like parents are counselling children all the time. What else? Anything else you can think of?
People from different countries.
Yeah. And we're actually going to talk about that a little bit later. I'm going to unpack that slightly. Okay, anything else you can think of?
Counseling at workplace.
Workplace, yes. So when your colleagues are struggling, it's almost like we're accidental counsellors whenever somebody's having a struggle. And we can see that even in the shopping centre, like I've seen over my years, I'm sure you have as well, lots of parents who are struggling with their children and they're exasperated and in some situations I have gone up to them and I have, just been really supportive with them and say, you're doing a really good job. And I've also been in situations where I've said, if you might try this, or I've actually done something and spoken to the child in that sort of counselling way, just to try and help that situation, not in a nosy way, not in a sort of pushing myself on somebody or whatever, but just to let them know that they're supported. I think that's a really important thing. All right, let's go, let's carry on, which is, what behaviour, as an accidental counsellor, do you need to manage? So we've got these situations. Let's think about the behaviour that people need to manage.
Calmness.
Sorry?
Calmness.
Well, so that's what we're wanting to bring into it, but why are we wanting to help somebody to calm? What's the behaviour that we're seeing that tells us they need our help?
Anger.
Anger. So when people
Anxiety.
anger,
You wanted to write?
no, it's all right. It's all good. Anxiety.
Problematic behavior.
So tell me what problematic behaviours. Who was that? Who said that?
I.
Yeah. What kind of problematic behaviours?
Arguing.
Arguments. Yeah. Yeah. What else?
Can it be self-harm?
Self-harm? Yeah. Definitely.
Crying.
Yeah, when somebody's crying and clearly distressed.
Would you put autism and other disorders?
So I'm going to put in neurodiversity. And do you know what? It's actually not so much the person who's is neurodiverse, but it might actually be the people around that person who's got a neurodiversity and is not handling it very well. And I say that as a parent of a child who has a neurodiversity. So I completely get it. What else?
Homelessness.
Oh, sorry, what?
Homelessness. Homelessness.
Homelessness. Yes. So when they're homeless, that's a situation. But what might they be if they're homeless?
Hopeless.
Oh, hopelessness. Sorry, because I was going to say homelessness can lead to hopelessness. So we were on the same page. I just couldn't hear you properly. Hopelessness. When somebody's hopeless, feels hopeless. Yep.
Overthinking and taking lots of stress.
Oh, overthinking. Oh my goodness me. We all know people who overthink and who are stressing.
For nothing.
Yeah, often for nothing. What else?
Guilt, I think sometimes the guilt itself.
Yes. And that is such a hard one, isn't it?
Especially for the parents.
Yeah, it is very hard for parents, yes. There is a lot of parent guilt that's around the place. What other things?
When someone is dysregulated.
When somebody's dysregulated. So let's unpack that, because we all kind of know what dysregulated means and what it might look like, but what might the emotions be behind dysregulation? And what might the situation be?
Like outbursts.
So outbursts, yes?
Depression.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's a great responses that you've got here. Yeah. Anything else?
Sometimes it could be lack of decision making as well. They can't come down to
What's that word?
undecisive or
Undecisive. Yeah, there's another word. So undecisive is one of the words I was thinking. Decisive. Begins with a P. This is one of those situations where my brain's just stopped. It begins with a P. When you're not prolonging something, but when you're putting something off.
procrastination.
Procrastination.
Procrastination. That's it. When somebody's procrastinating. All right, let's move on. This is a full piece of butcher's paper. Let's move on to the next one.
Fear also plays a very big role.
Hang on a minute, I can't hear you while the butcher's paper's moving. Ah,
She's saying fear.
fear, yes, actually. I'm going to whack that on because that is very important. So, fear. Yeah, okay, so what are some of the responses you have received from people when you've tried to help? So when you've tried to help somebody, what has been some of the responses?
I cannot do this.
I can't do this, so it's too hard.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, that's lovely. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you. Yes. Let's not forget the positives. It's really important. Thank you. What else?
It's easier said than done.
Easier said than done. Yes, it is. It is always easier said than done.
You don't understand.
Oh yeah, you don't understand. Yeah. That's
Don't try to teach
whatever. Whatever.
I'm a school teacher,
I was gonna say, particularly children. Like, whatever. Yeah, that's when my English accent comes out. Whatever. Okay, what? Somebody else was gonna say something.
Why do you care?
Why do you care?
because they're talking to you.
Yeah.
Seems obvious, but yes, absolutely.
Right.
Why do you care?
I want to give up.
I want to give up.
Yeah, I don't want to do it.
Yeah. Okay.
But
You've said nuts.
I'm going to come back to that and tell you a little story. You know. What else?
You know what? Never mind.
You know what? Never mind. Yes. Never mind. Oops. Yeah.
Sometimes they say, I'll give it a go.
Yeah, they will.
Yeah.
I had a lot of people saying,
I'll give it a
I'll
go.
give it a go. All right, then I'll give it a go. I also get all of these as well. So, anything else? Let me come back to the but. So when I was I might even have been a trainee psychologist, like an intern psychologist at this time. It was so long ago. But there was sort of a wise colleague who's much more experienced than me, who said, I use the 3 buts and you're out rule. And I said, what's the 3 buts and you're out rule? And they said, when you provide a response or a helpful response and they say, yeah, but, and then you provide another one and they go, yeah, but, and then you provide another one and they go, yeah, but that won't work. And when it's 3 buts, the message is they're not ready to be helped. It's not that they don't want to be helped, it's that they're not ready to be helped. So when I have 3 buts from somebody, I'm not going to help I'm not going to go in that direction anymore. I'm going to think about what actually is it that they need right now. So, all right, brilliant. Lots of really helpful things. What I'm going to say is hopefully by the end of this session, you will have some really practical skills to manage this. So you will know how to manage some of these comments that come back to you. But what we're going to do is do some small groups work, which means this beautifully set up room is going to start looking like it's chaos. But that's okay, we can manage. Okay, I've got 3 questions for you. There are 3 parts to this exercise. So I want you to break up into groups of 3 or 4 people. So I'm going to ask you to do that one at a time. I'm going to ask you to do things one at a time, because otherwise you'll get confused. So the first thing is, let's break up into groups of 3 or 4, so you're going to need to move the chairs around. So I don't mind how you do that, but move your chairs around so you're in groups of 3 or 4 people. So you might want to, that's okay, you can have your back to me, that's completely fine, I won't be insulted. All right, are we in your groups? Okay. So on the following slide, there are. Just wait till all the moving happens. So, we got that?
I don't know, but
That's all right. However you want to do it. If you want to move slightly further back, that's completely fine. Like, however you want to do it, make sure you've got enough room. No more than 4 because then it'll take too long. Okay. So on the following slide, we're going to do this 3 times. Got 3 different questions. There are lots of photos. Okay. what I want you to choose a photo which says something about how you feel if someone comes into the centre or in the shops or in any of those situations that we were talking about. If there's somebody in your space and is displaying some big emotions, and we talked about some of those big emotions, talk about why you chose the photo and about how you feel in those situations, okay? When it comes to looking at the photos, don't take a long time, just look at the photos, and the one that sort of catches your eye is usually the one that's got some meaning for you. Okay, so I'm not going to give you very long, less than 10 minutes, probably slightly more than 5 minutes, and then we're going to move into the next question and the next question after that. Is everybody clear?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So here's the photos. So just a recap on the question. A photo which says something about how you feel if someone was in your space and is displaying big emotions. That's the question, all right? Okay. I'm going to move out of the way somewhere else.
Do the grab the chair.
Yeah, I might just bring this chair over here.
It's going to have a question and the picture side by side.
Sorry? No, it's all right, got it.
You're good?
बहुत ज़्यादा दिखने बहुत ज़्यादा रो रहे हैं तुसी कितना महसूस करते हैं और सब आपका फोटो पिक करनी है स्क्रीन पे जितना अपने सामने
Oh,
तुसी कितना महसूस करते हैं
there we go.
Yeah, there it is. Cool. So I was wondering if there's a way to get both of them.
Side by side, probably not. No, so if you just remember the questions. So, yes, that's a good idea. If you need to take a picture of the questions so you don't forget, feel free to do that. How you feel if someone comes into your space and is displaying big emotions. Why you chose the photo and about how you feel. That's the question for you. Okay? Each group got a photo of it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, there we go. These are the photos.
Which one you want to choose? Pick the four.
It's not about the photo, it's just about, the photo is just about a prompt for you to talk about your feelings. You don't need to analyse the photo, just say, what was it about that photo that spoke to me? So I just interrupted because I could hear you talking about this swan over here, or whatever kind of bird it is, and you know why this girl might have been with this one. It's not about why the thing in the picture is happening. It's what did that photo speak to you? What did it say to you about how you might feel about it? So you might look at this photo of the, let's just choose one in the middle, and you look at these and they're fireworks, and you might say, that makes me really feel like joyful and happy and celebrating. Or you might say, actually the noise of fireworks is really overwhelming, and so when somebody comes into the centre and they've got big emotions, I feel really overwhelmed. So does that clarify?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Was supportive of you. It could have been at the time or it could have been later on. It doesn't matter. But when you felt supported to do that. So again, talk about the photo and the experience. Okay? And everybody understand that question? You've got copies of it? Okay? All right, here are the photos. Same photos again, just choose a different photo.
Can we see the question once again,
Yes,
please?
you can. So, when you have been supported.
Oh yeah, I'll just take a photo.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. And also, just in case not everybody can see it, there's a couple of photos down here that I'm just going to describe to you. We've got a photo down here that says, please keep a safe distance. We've got a little girl who's got which I think is hilarious, but anyway, she's painting her toenails, this little toddler. Then we've got a girl who's sort of dancing down the street with a swan, and then we've got a very elderly couple just sitting next to each other, just on the side, not really talking. So that's what's down this bottom of the screen if you can't see it. If anybody wants to think about those photos as well. But feel free to move around and to make sure that you've got full view of all of the photos. Okay. Same pictures. Choose a photo which depicts a time when you've not been supported. Okay, talk about the photo and your own experience. So when you feel like you've not been supported. Okay, the model that I often use. There are lots of communication models that you can find, you know, on the internet or whatever. But I've been using this model for, I don't know, like 30 years or something, for a very long time, maybe not quite that long. So if we think about effective communication, we've got the speaker, somebody who's saying something. They need to say something to the listener, okay? So they're going to say something to that person. That person then hears it and then is going to respond. And so they become the speaker, and then this person becomes the listener, and it goes round and round in a circle, and that's effective communication. And effective communication is basically where the intent of what you wanted to say equals the impact. So if you said to somebody, oh, like you said to your partner, oh, could you please pick up some milk on your way home? And your partner says, yeah, absolutely, sure, I can do that. The intent, can you pick up some milk? Pretty reasonable, pretty friendly, pretty kind of normal. The answer, yep, sure, no problem, pretty normal, pretty easy, no problem, okay? So that's how communication works. However, there is a slight problem with that. Well, not a problem, but it's more of a reality, really, is that between these two people, there is what we call a filter. And so it's never quite as easy as, honey, can you pick up some milk? And, okay, sure, not a problem, that's the telephone. So it goes around and around like this, but it's got to find its way through this filter. And our filters are filled with all sorts of different things, okay? So I'm going to give you an example about the milk. Okay, so let's imagine that we've got a family. There's mum and dad and a couple of kids, and there's a baby and a toddler and a kindy child, right? Let's go with that. And so what happens this particular day is that it's pouring with rain, like it does in Sydney from time to time. And what we all know when it rains in Sydney is everything comes to a standstill. And it's not just like little gentle rain, it's usually torrential. There's storms, there's water everywhere. And so this family have woken up to a morning where there's torrential rain, like it was a few weeks ago. And so they all get up and they're all having breakfast, that's all fine. Husband leaves for work and he has to get the bus to work. He's left the car at home because it's easier, there's nowhere to park at the office or wherever he's working. So, but of course it's pouring with rain, so he's got an umbrella but he's already drenched. He gets to the bus stop for the bus, and because it's raining and it's pouring with rain, the bus is late, so he gets even wetter, and then the bus is full, and so the bus just drives past because it's full, right? As can also happen. And so eventually a bus stops and he gets on the bus and he gets to work, and because he's late for work now, his boss calls him into his office and says, you're late for work, that's not okay. You've been late before. If that happens again, you're going to be, on a warning. You're going to have a warning, right? So this guy is already soaking wet. He's late for work. He's just been told off by his boss. It gets to lunchtime and he realises he's left his lunch at home. And so now he has to go to the shop like, you know, down the street to buy a sandwich, and he comes back from lunch, like, slightly irritated is possibly the understatement of the century at that point in time. And so he gets back to his desk. Now, on the other side of that, so Mum has got the kids, she's getting the kids ready. Again, it's pouring with rain. So she gets all of the kids into the car to drop the middle one off at like at preschool, and the kindy child off at school, and then she's got the baby. And she has to do a few things that day. So she's got to do the grocery shopping, she's got to go to Service New South Wales, and she's got to go to Medicare. So those are on her list for the day. So she works it out, she goes to Service New South Wales. There's a massive queue, because there always is. So she sits in the queue for Service New South Wales, and then she goes in and she does whatever it is that she needs to do. And then she's like, okay, that took me like an hour longer than I thought. I'm not going to have time to go to Medicare or the bank or whatever it is. I just need to go and do the grocery shopping, because then I've got to pick the little one up from preschool and the other one up from kindy, right? So she goes and does the grocery shopping. So she does the grocery shopping, but before she does that her baby has vomited all over her. So now she's got vomit on her from her baby. She's running late, she doesn't have time to go home and change. And it's pouring with rain, and she's driving the car, and she's in Woolies doing the shopping. So she's done all of the shopping. And then she picks up the little kid from daycare and the kid from primary school. The little baby is now asleep in the back of the car. She gets home, she's like, I'm going to get the baby out, wakes the baby up. She's putting the shopping away, and then she goes, oh, for goodness sake, I forgot the milk. So she rings up husband and says, darling, I forgot to get the milk. Can you get some milk on the way home from work? At which point, he loses it entirely and says, you've got to be kidding me. That was your job. You had the one job, was to get the grocery shopping. Do you not understand what it's like for me? I've just had the worst day possible, and now you've just been at home with the kids and you've just forgotten the milk. Right? Big argument. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Like, it might not be about milk. It could be about something. So what has moved from a really simple, honey, could you pick up the milk? And he says yes, has become like bigger than Ben-Hur, like it's this huge argument. So if we think about this couple's filter, it is filled with stress and annoyance and being wet and children and all of that kind of chaos that happens. So that's one sort of way that the filter can get filled. But there are also a whole bunch of other ways that the filter can get filled with, which are not necessarily related to our specific circumstances. So what I want to know from you is, I want you to give me some ideas of bigger things in society that can fill our filters without us even realizing it. What might be some of those things?
Traffic?
Sorry?
Traffic?
Traffic. So we all have to deal with traffic in Sydney, and so I would put traffic there, definitely. But what is it that, absolutely, so we're frustrated. Let's think bigger than traffic. What other kind of things might fill our filters?
Your work day?
Your work day, so you just had a bad day. Like, bad day at work. Yeah. Let's think a bit more about that. What about if you're in a job you really, really hate? So, not a great job, like bad job. Or what if you haven't got a job and you're unemployed? Okay, so unemployment can really fill our filters, because that is incredibly stressful.
Homelessness, actually.
Homelessness, yeah. What else?
How about the curiosity?
Sorry?
Curiosity.
Curiosity.
Curiosity. Tell me about that.
Like, you're on the way to do something, but there's something happening there. Like,
Oh.
they're fighting around you. Or
Oh, okay. So what's that? But how is that going to fill your filter? How's it going to get your filter all full up so you don't.
Now she's late from work because she was listening to
Oh, right, okay, so that's
very
okay, all right, I'm with you. Okay, all right, being cheeky. Okay, let's think about those bigger global things that can fill our filters.
I think financial constraints.
Financial stress, yeah, finances.
Can it be a biological factor as well, like in hormonal changes and stuff?
Yeah, so it can be, so why would, let's put that under a big umbrella that says physical health.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Psychological health.
Yes, so our mental health. Yep.
Social roles and responsibilities. You could be a carer and things around her.
Yeah. Yep, what else? Let's dig a bit deeper into this social roles. Let's think about that. What other things might fill our filter when we're thinking about social roles?
Looking after a sick child.
Yes, so looking after, so that sort of caring, but I want to go a bit deeper into what social roles specifically might encompass. Let's think laterally here.
Responsibility.
Yes, so responsibilities, and also let me think about if you've got, who has here very strict ideas about who should do what in the family
Social
or in the
norms.
world. Yeah, so what kind of things would they be?
Like, women should be cooking.
Yeah,
Gender
so
roles.
like a woman's place is in the kitchen, those kinds of, so that's an idea about gender roles. So men are to provide, women are to care for the children. So that can fill out, so either we've got that opinion or we are subject to that opinion and we feel like we are stressed by other people having that opinion. It's like, well, your job is at the home and you're working and that's not okay. Or, maybe, well, you're unemployed and you're supposed to be providing for your family and that's not okay. So so gender roles and ideas about gender can fill our filter as well. What other things?
Security in terms of safety concerns.
Safety, definitely. And when we think about safety, what are some of the really specific things that we might think about?
Can I leave the house or should I come inside the house? Both ways.
So domestic violence. So domestic violence, yes. What other things? Let's think about it. Let's think about gender a bit more, and not specifically gender, but what are those big things like gender that we might have opinions about or be subject to other people's opinions about? What are some of those things?
Superior and inferior. Superiority and inferior.
Yeah, but what's that related to?
I think it's a very cultural thing.
Culture.
Racism.
Yeah, so culture and racism. Now, and so we unfortunately have people in the world who have opinions about cultures that are completely wrong or misguided or misinformation. They can be really racist about people of different cultural backgrounds. And so so we can either have that opinion about people, which fills up or we're on the receiving end of other people's opinions about culture. So I can remember not that long ago, in a couple of areas of Sydney, there were these big arguments about when a community wanted to build some mosques. And they were like, no, we can't have mosques, that's not okay. Well, that is absolutely racist and it's completely culturally dominating kind of thing. It's like we're right and you're wrong. And that fills people's filters. So thinking about gender, culture, racism, what's the other big one that fits in there?
Stereotypes.
Yeah, so we're thinking about stereotypes. So let's think about what is the other big one that people have stereotypes around and that can really fill our filters. In the same way that culture, racism, gender.
Discrimination.
Yeah, discrimination because of
Age.
Oh, well, age, yeah, I wasn't going to say that, but yes, age. That's not what I was thinking of, but absolutely, yes, it is. Let's think, what
Color.
Colour, well that goes into racism. Yeah. What's the other one?
Stereotypes about gender as well.
So we've got gender, but there's stereotypes about, it's often linked to culture, but it's not necessarily. It's an R word.
Religion.
Religion. We see so much antagonism about religion. And again, either being on the receiving end of it or being the, you know, making it. All right, so we've got the big ones in that. What else might we put on there? So we've got mental health, physical health, finances, homeless, unemployment, you know, traffic, just the, and often we can just laugh at, you know, it's like, oh, traffic. But actually that's about the traffic issue. It's about our environment. Now, there's another big thing that's happening in the world at the moment that most people are just shocked and appalled by. What's the big thing that's happening at the moment in our world? Political. So I have never seen so many people be stressed by politics as they are right now, because we are watching one of the biggest countries in the world implode, and everybody is worrying about how it's going to impact us. Everybody's talking about it. It's impacting the talk around our election as well that's coming up. So politics is in there. So when you think, and there's a myriad of other things that go into our filter.
And I would think strongly like say social platforms.
Social media,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. It's and bullying for our children, and this is a very sticky pen. Social media and bullying. And you know what? When we think of bullying, we think about children in schools, but bullying happens in the workplace. It happens in social clubs. It happens everywhere. So we need to think about our filters, because when we look at this diagram, what we can see are two filters. We've got a filter here, and we've got a filter here. So this speaker has got to communicate a message through their own filter, and then through the other person's filter to get to the other side. And when I look at that and I think about this, I think, my goodness me, it's amazing that people actually have straightforward conversations at all. So what do you think that we need to do? We can't take responsibility for other people. We can only take responsibility for ourselves. So what do you think that we need to do to try and fix this, or try and make this better than it is?
We need to be more aware of our filters.
We do need to be aware of what's in our filters.
Yeah.
So this takes a whole lot of reflection. We have to really be honest and reflect on what is in my filter that is impacting the way that I interact with other people. And sometimes that can be incredibly uncomfortable.
Yes.
But if we are wanting to be supportive of other people, we're wanting to be supportive of everybody. And so we might have to be supportive of somebody that maybe we don't agree with their lifestyle choice. Maybe we've got an issue with their religion. Maybe maybe we don't understand disability. Maybe we think, oh my goodness me, well, if they just sorted themselves out, they could find a job, you know? We have to look deep within ourselves to find out what is in our filter, and then what do we need to do?
Put it on your side.
Put it where?
Put it in your side pocket.
Put it in your pocket. You know what? I'm going to ask you to be even more radical than that.
So to be aware and put them aside, because that has no role
Yeah.
in the relationship we're going to have
Yeah.
thereafter.
Yeah.
Trying to
What I say to people is we need to get a high pressure fire officer's hose and set it on our filters and like hose them out. And I always think this is disgusting, and I'm really sorry. But when I think of that, I always think about, this is my brother worked at McDonald's when he was at school, and one of his jobs was to clean out the fat traps at McDonald's, which sounds to me to be utterly disgusting. and messy and horrible and smelly. But it's almost like I have this picture of all of those things in our filter that we need to get this high pressure hose and hose out the fat traps and all of those things that sit in our filter that actually impact the way that we see the world and we see people in the world. What do you think about that? Yeah.
We are mostly 6 here. Sorry to bring that up. I know
no,
I'm
that's
not
fine.
trying to be
Completely
racist
fine.
or something.
No.
So our first guru has summed everything up about the filters in a one sentence.
Yeah.
Saying Manas ki jaat sabha ek ka pehchan bo.
Okay, you're going to have to translate that.
I'm going to translate that. I know that. That means we all human beings, we are all one.
Yeah.
We are all one without any filters, without any religion, without any gender, without any culture, without any racism, without any social rules, without all of that thing. When you are really helping someone, you are just helping someone who is just like you,
Yeah.
who is just in that position.
Yeah.
You could be that person.
Yeah.
So remember the God and help that person just as you would like to be helped.
100%. I'm actually going to just put language up there because that, when you said that in your language, I was like, what on earth is that? But you know what? I'm going to come back to you with that and say it's not from a religious leader or anything like that. But many years ago, I was being trained in a parenting program called Circle of Security, and it was a 4-day training. And I always say that in that training, there was several hundred people in the room, but I'm just talking about my team. And I feel like, me personally, I feel like I was taken apart and put back together ever so slightly differently. And one of the things that was so impactful from that training was this phrase, which sums up what you just said. And the person who's facilitating the training was from Circle of Security, Kent Hoffman, and he said that when he was a young psychology student in the 70s, his psychology professor said to him these words, and they've never left him, which is, every person you will ever meet has infinite worth. And when he said that, even when I say it, I just get goosebumps. And in fact, so I've just written a book. It was my second book, and we're launching. Well, I'm just gonna let you know. I'm just gonna do a very shameless plug, which is called The Anatomy of Domestic Violence, and we're going to launch it with lead on the 20th. We've just changed the date, 20th of May. And in that book, in the second to last chapter, I actually start it with this story about the training, that every person you will ever meet has infinite worth. Because we use that in the training that we deliver for practitioners who are training in our child protection parenting program. So this is for parents whose children have been removed into the child protection system because they have been a victim of harm. And so I said this, and somebody in the group put their hand up and said, "Really? Really? Would you really say that about domestic violence perpetrators?" And I said, absolutely, 100%, yes I would. Because every infant that is born is precious and valuable, and actually what happens to people in life is life happens and impacts them, and people become alcoholics, or they become violent, or they take drugs, but they don't choose, or they become abusive to their children. They don't choose to do that. They do that because there is something has happened. It's not excusing the behaviour, it's understanding the behaviour, but understanding that murderers, people who are in prison, have, just because they're human, the very fact that they're human, they have infinite worth. And we have to hold on to that if we're going to be supportive of anybody who comes into our into our world and into our vicinity. We can not like the behaviour and we can call out the behaviour, but the person themselves has infinite worth.
Yeah.
And we have to hold on to that. Sometimes that's really hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard. But when that becomes your North Star, which it is for me, that's what I hold on to. It's like when I'm most challenged, I get infinite worth. Every person you will ever meet has infinite worth. Raised in families where emotions weren't really talked about. I grew up in the north of England, and emotions really were not talked about in the north of England. They probably still aren't. But what we're going to talk about is some of the most important things that we can do in helping people manage their own emotions and us to be able to manage their emotions. Because when we can manage our emotions, we're much more able to solve problems and to be able to see things clearly and see things differently. So what I've put up on the screen is a whole list of emotions. What I've put at the top in bold, there are 4 basic emotions. So if you're not confident about words for emotions, you can just think about these 4 words. And they are sad, mad, glad, and scared. These are the 4 basic emotions. So sad, angry, happy, and scared. Every other emotion comes off these 4 emotions, and also is a combination of 2 of these emotions. So if I said to you, what emotions are disappointed out of those top 4? If I said to you disappointed, what's the combination of emotions?
Sad and
Angry.
Mad. Sad and angry, yes. That's what disappointed is. Okay? So I want you to keep that in mind when we're talking about the next parts of the presentation. So I'm going to show you this little video about empathy from Brené Brown. It's only 5 minutes. Hopefully it works. Well, there are things in that she was talking about in terms of empathy and compassion and boundaries that were surprising for you, or gave you another way of looking at it. I've got some heads nodding. Does anybody want to give some feedback about how it felt watching that video?
It takes a lifetime to learn that skill set.
Well, I think it takes a lifetime to perfect that skill set. I don't think it takes a lifetime to learn it.
To implement in your life, sometimes
It's an ongoing thing.
because creating boundaries,
Yeah.
it can start with as small as saying, no, I don't like this food,
Yeah.
to going like, nah, that's not a behavior I'm going to accept.
Yeah. That's right.
And then that sometimes comes with consequences.
Yeah.
So learning your way to maneuver around them
Mm-hmm.
takes a lifetime.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Generally, with our work, there are a lot of expectations attached with it.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very good exercise and I always say to people that we are not here to make people happy.
No.
We are here to support whatever we can. And recently, this week, we received a couple of clients, quite tough one. And one of them kind of challenged that, well, I'm here. What's the use of coming here if you can't help me? So they kind of think going to an organization, sometimes in their mindset, they think, oh, everything will be okay. So learning about and it's kind of orientation that we have got boundaries. And if it was said so clear in the
Yeah.
video that it doesn't go together. We are here to provide what we can with our boundaries,
Yeah.
and otherwise we'll be lost.
We'll be lost.
Yeah.
We will be lost. And that's the most important thing. So we're not going to do small groups because we don't really have time to do that. And actually we were talking about a role play, but I'm thinking about, I was doing role plays next week when we're doing sort of part 2. we might hold it over to that because there's some things that we really need to nail down today. Is that okay? All right. So I'm going to throw these questions out just to everybody to quickly, as quick as you can, if you've got an answer, give it to me. So what's your role as an accidental counsellor?
To support.
To support. Yep, we're here to support. We're not here to fix anything. We're not here to give people advice. We're here to support people to make some changes, to get them some practical support. But it's not about advising them, it's not about telling them what to do, it's about supporting them.
It can't be just empathizing with them and let them decompress whatever is hurting them, or whatever, just giving them the listening ear.
Well, we're going to come on to that in a minute because we're going to do a bit more. We do more than that. So, what are the types of situations you can manage? What are the things that, as you know, that you can deal with? What are some of those situations?
As counselors?
Yeah, in your role with the Harman Foundation. What can you do and what needs to go to somebody else?
You can listen,
You can listen.
but you cannot like send somebody over there to give them immediate help, you know?
No, okay. So we can't do immediate stuff. We can listen. We can point people in the right direction. Okay. Anything else? What can we do? What's up in our scope, within our boundaries?
We can't dictate them to do something, but
No.
we can direct them.
Yeah.
After listening to them,
Yeah.
whenever it's needed.
What else are we not? What's not in our scope, in our
We can
boundaries?
assess the situation based upon the conversation.
Yeah.
If it seems to be life-threatening or something, we need to escalate the things.
Yeah. Okay. So we escalate it to. Who do we know? Who to escalate it to?
Sometimes the call could be, I'm in the street and my husband is after me,
Yeah.
and he may have a knife in
Yeah.
his hand, or vice versa, and I'm just calling to rescue me, and
Yeah.
you just think, well,
I can't do that, but the
I can't
police
do that.
can.
Yeah.
We're going to ring the police right now. You tell me exactly where you are. I'm going to ring 000.
Right.
Or if you can't, but some people, again, getting back to language, for some people they can ring 000 themselves. If somebody says, you know what, this is an opportunity for you. This is what you ring 000 for. For other people, they might need you to ring 000 and direct the police to them. So, what are the types of situations you shouldn't manage and not within your boundaries?
We can't diagnose someone.
Can't diagnose somebody. We can't. And what else can't we do related to that?
we can't make decisions for them.
We can't make decisions for them.
Respecting their autonomy.
We have to. Yeah. We can't do. We're not doing therapy with them. That's really important because often people who are supporting people can get sucked into the story that they're telling us, and then we're moving into a therapeutic space, and that's not our role. And so sometimes that can happen in ever such a slight way that we don't actually realise we're doing that. But it's really important that we have our boundaries in place around that, because somebody has rung a helpline or come to the service or whatever it might be for practical assistance or for emergencies, crises. They've not come for therapy. So we have to remember that. So, and we can refer that on to people. Our responsibility and what we can manage is knowing who we refer people to. And sometimes we make warm referrals and we pass them on in a very warm referral way, but it's understanding. So our role is to know who we refer people to. Okay, so how do you manage yourself when you feel like someone is asking you to cross your boundaries? How does this impact you? How do you manage yourself when that happens?
Make the tough choice and don't let them dictate you.
Yes, but how do you manage what's happening for you internally? What
First
do you
of all,
do?
acknowledge it.
It's reflecting that it's happening and then getting support for it. It's like, I'm feeling really uncomfortable because this person is crossing my boundaries and that's not comfortable for me. And I need to be really clear about putting a boundary in place. And when somebody is in need and in crisis, saying, putting that boundary in can make us feel really uncomfortable, because we're doing this, especially as volunteers, because we really care about people. But we have to put in a boundary for them, because they need to have a boundary around themselves, but also for us, because if we don't put in boundaries, that's when we suffer vicarious trauma, and that's when we get burnout, and that's when we leave. And we don't want to do
There's a
that.
feeling of guilt, you know.
It's a feeling of guilt,
Yeah.
yes. We feel guilty because we can't fix everything. We absolutely can't fix everything. Even me, having worked in the sector as a community psychologist for over 30 years, I have to say no to people. I have to say, this is not my role, this is not my job, I cannot do this, and absolutely I feel guilty about it. And so what do we do with those feelings?
We work on them, we bring them to supervision.
We bring them to supervision. That's beautiful. That's what supervision's about. So we need to have supervision. So supervisors can support you. Who else can support you? I want you to think about who else can support you.
Your peers.
Your peers, yes. Counsellors, yeah, our own counsellors.
Support network could be
Support.
your family, friends.
Yeah, family and friends, those people who are around you. For me, they are absolutely vital. It's not for me to talk about work stuff with them, but it's for them to help me be me, and to help me look at life differently, and to help me enjoy myself, you know, and to have deep conversations with, you know. So it's not necessarily about work, but it's so supportive. Even so, you know, sometimes just saying to somebody, you know what, I've had a really tough day and we've had some really tough calls and I just need a hug. When I was writing the book that's about to be released, The Anatomy of Domestic Violence, I needed lots of hugs. It was a very difficult book to write. And so sometimes I would send a message, I'd be like, I really need a hug. Can you give me a metaphorical hug if I can't see you in person? I just need a hug. I just need to connect with another human being. And for them to I just feel like I need to be held. All right, let's move on, unless anybody has anything else they want to add to that bit. Okay, so we're talking about managing other people's big emotions. And we are going to have we're going to use a mnemonic for this. Now, whether you're on the phone or whether you're in person, you can do this. And when you do it, when you're on the phone or on a video, if you actually think about it and do these things, what it does is come down the telephone of people. Now, I've worked in the UK, I worked as a counsellor with Childline, which is Kids Helpline here. I've worked on Parent Line, you know, I filled in on shifts on Parent Line, so I've worked on helplines, I know what it's like. And so sometimes you can think, well, I haven't got the person in the room with me, but if you put these things into place, irrespective of whether they can see you do it, it actually changes the way that you offer that person support. So the first thing that you do is you sit down. You sit with somebody. Why do you sit? Why do you sit down?
To make them relax.
To make them relaxed.
No? Why do
A
you
bit
sit?
of stability, a sense of security and control.
Well, I mean, it is all of those things, but yeah. When you sit down, what is the message? When I sit down, what is the message that I'm giving to you?
I'm here to listen.
I am here to listen. I have got this time.
Yeah.
This is the time. This is time for you. So you sit down, and then you have an open posture, right? So you can sit there like that. If I sit here like this, what are you thinking?
You're not listening to us.
I'm not listening to you. I'm a bit judgy. I'm
Yeah.
judging you.
Yeah.
But if we sit with an open posture, what does that say?
You're open
I'm
to
open.
I'm open to it. I'm here. I'm not judging you. I'm just kind of listening to you. The next thing is L, and this is to lean forward. So and lean in to what they're saying. So sometimes they say something. So we've got an open posture. Sometimes we just lean forward. And what does that say? When I lean forward, what's that saying to somebody?
You're being attentive.
I'm being attentive. I am listening to everything that you're saying. Okay. And then there's E, which is, somebody said eye contact before, and yes, this is eye contact. Now, I will just put in a disclaimer for that. For some cultures, eye contact is very disrespectful, and we would not do that. So when I say eye contact, it's either making eye contact or being aware that eye contact is disrespectful, and so I'm thinking about what my eye contact is doing and is saying, okay? And then the final one is R for relax. If we're tense and we're like, I don't know what's going on here, then the other person is going to not feel relaxed at all. They're going to be stressed. So we remember solar. This is about us. Okay, so when we are supporting somebody, we need to think solar, not solar, solar, okay? But then we're going to do something else. So we're going to do something, so this is our presence. Then what we're going to do is manage people's big emotions in the words that we use, and again in our body language, but in a different kind of way. Now this is called emotion coaching. Has anybody heard about emotion coaching? No. Emotion coaching was developed by a psychologist called John Gottman. John Gottman is probably the world's most respected and experienced researcher and psychologist in terms of couple relationships and family relationships. He's been working in this field for over 40 years. He and his wife, Julie. And many years ago, so in the 90s, John Gottman came up with this idea of emotion coaching from his own experience with his own daughter. And he realized the way that he responded to her really impacts the way that she settled. So she was a toddler at the time. So he really thought about it, and he did the research, and he came up with this concept of emotion coaching. And I think this is the one most significant skill set any person who is in contact with another human being can do. I think it's so important. It should be taught in every single TAFE, university, high school, primary school setting. I think we all need this, because when we emotion coach people, it is profound. There are profound responses that come. It is a 5-point plan, and it must be done in the order that I'm telling you, and I will explain to you why. And we're going to use another mnemonic for this one, so I've slightly rewritten it from John Gottman just to make it easy to remember. But if you're interested in reading some more about this, his book, Raising an Emotionally Intelligent Child, is the book to read. In fact, it's so important. When I was managing my team, if I knew team members, they were not allowed to see a client until they had read this book. There was another book as well that they had to read, which is by Dan Siegel, called The Whole Brain Child. But Raising an Emotionally Intelligent Child by John Gottman. So we're using the mnemonic river. R. R is for recognize. What we are doing is recognizing that the person that we're talking to is experiencing an emotion. But not only that, it's about recognizing that we have a response to that emotion. So it's like, what is my response to this person's emotion? Particularly because we were pretty much raised in families that don't talk about emotions. And so when we're not comfortable with something, what we tend to do is to step back from it, because it's like, this is a big emotion and this is a bit scary, and I'm having a big emotion about this now. So the very first thing we need to do is to recognize how we feel about it and recognize the emotion in the person that we're seeing. Now this is tricky because emotions are often non-verbal. People don't say to you, oh, I'm feeling sad today, or I'm feeling really angry today. They display it in their behavior and in the other words. So what we have to do is get really good at looking at what the emotion is, which is why I started this session talking about mad, sad, glad, scared. because we have to know what the fundamental emotions are in order to be able to help that person manage their emotions. Okay, so recognize is the first. Intimacy is the second. And that sounds like a bit of a weird word for a situation like this, because when we think of intimacy, we often think about couple relationships, or we think about parent and children. We don't usually think about it in a professional context. But when we think about intimacy, intimacy is essentially the opposite. When somebody shows a big emotion and we want to step backwards out of it and like protect ourselves, intimacy is the opposite of that, and it's basically stepping into it and saying, you and I are connecting right now, just you and me. And I have done this in the middle of groups of people, and somebody I've recognized needs to manage a big emotion, and what I've done in a group setting is to, I'm going to use you as an example, is to come up to them and just have a conversation with them. Other people are here and they're watching it, but at this point in time, it's an intimate, small moment just between you and I. I'm talking to you, right? So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about intimacy, not about sexual intimacy or relationship intimacy or romance or anything like that. It's about connection. And remember, we started at the beginning of today with that quote from Brené Brown, which was about connection and our fear of disconnection. So intimacy, verbalize. So this is they're all really important, but this is one that often people get confused about. And this is absolutely key for those of you who are supporting people on helplines or, in person. So what do we do generally speaking, when somebody is in front of us displaying a big emotion, or at home or whatever, what do we usually say? Wow. Yes, what do we ask them? What do we say? What do we ask?
Try and suppress it in a way, calm down, just relax.
Yeah, but before that, we usually say something along the lines of, how do you feel?
Okay.
How are you feeling? We usually ask them a question about their internal state. The thing about that is when we think about connection and disconnection, if we are asking somebody how they feel, and we say it very empathically and very caringly, how do you feel? What's the underlying message of that question? When you really think about it. Pardon?
That we care about you?
Opposite of that. Because if I have to ask you how you're feeling, it means we're not connected, because I don't know how you're feeling. I know this is, go with me for a minute.
No, I'm understanding.
You're understanding. So when we say to you, wow, you look like you're so sad at the moment. You look like, I can see how scared you are. This is a really scary situation. Wow, I can hear how angry you are. You are so angry and so frustrated with this situation. I can see that. I can feel that. When we say, I get it, you were really disappointed. What's that like? Instead of me saying, how are you feeling? When I say that and I label what I'm seeing in front of me, what's the difference? Can you feel a difference, or can you see a difference?
Absolutely, because asking someone, like for example, someone is really maybe car crash and being tormented at the moment, don't know where they are, and you're asking, how are you feeling? Like it's just so not relevant.
It's not relevant
at all.
When I see things on the news, like somebody, some tragedy has happened on the news or some big thing, and some journalist says, oh, how are you feeling? Do you know what I do in those situations?
Exactly.
I yell at the television. Yeah. I literally yell, and I'm like, for goodness, seriously? That is what you're asking when this person's house has just burnt down? Like, really? But when you say to them, oh my goodness me, you must be feeling devastated. That is so hard. that person is like, oh, this person gets me. So we don't say it in a way that says, you are angry or you are sad. We say it in a way that we say, it looks to me like, it sounds like. So I'll give you an example. One of my kids, a few years ago, we were having a chat in the kitchen. He was telling me this story. And I said, and I have to say, my children joke that they have been emotion coached to within an inch of their lives. They have grown up with this. They are absolutely experts at being emotion coached. And I said to him, you sound really angry with them. And he thought about it for a minute and he said, no, I'm not angry. I'm really disappointed in them. And what did we say earlier about what is disappointment? What combination of emotions is disappointment? Sad and angry. So it's halfway there. So I'm in the ballpark. But when I say something like, you sound really angry with them, it's almost like I'm saying this is what I'm seeing, but giving them permission to correct me if I'm a bit off. And so if we're not 100% sure about the language of emotions, if we go with angry, sad, happy, scared, we're in the ballpark. And we are intelligent and emotionally intelligent and connected with people enough to be able to see it. We can do it. Lots of people think, I can't do that, or I'm putting words in their mouth. No, we're not. We're just saying what we're seeing. And we're saying, I'm connected with you and I can see this is really tough for you. So we're verbalizing the emotions that we're seeing. So our next word is E for empathy. And Brené Brown talked about it beautifully. But empathy is not feeling for someone. It's feeling with someone, and it's the outplaying of compassion. So we say it with words that match the behaviour that we're seeing, and we say it authentically, not just with our words, but with the way that we sound, and also with our body language. We say it with our whole bodies. So if you said to somebody, so particularly those of you who studied counselling, you will have been told, no doubt, that we're empathic and we talk to people and we engage them in the conversation. And I can tell you right now that if I was feeling really angry and somebody spoke to me like this, what would I want to do? I would want to punch them in the nose, possibly. I would say, that is outrageous. I want somebody, if I'm feeling angry, to say, oh my goodness me, I can hear how angry you are. So what we do when somebody is really elevated and really angry, what we do is we respond to them. So they might be at an 8 out of 10, like furious. So what we do is we go in like at a 6 out of 10. We're animated and we're almost matching the energy that they've got, but we're a bit lower. So somebody's like, I'm so angry and furious about this. And we go, I can see how angry and furious you are. Wow, I totally get that. And then what we do is we slightly bring it down, and then we bring it back. And so we've gone out at a 6. So they then respond at a 6. Then we go in at a 4. And so then they respond at a 4. And then we go in at a 2. And they come back to us at a 2. So the way that we respond to them actually brings somebody down. But if we say to somebody, which is what you said before, and it's a completely understandable thing, we'd say to somebody is, I'm going to really help you calm now. Actually, that's not what they need, because we're not matching their emotion.
That's why they say that you need to meet the client where they are.
Exactly. That is a really practical way of meeting the client where they're at. So we're showing empathy. So if we don't do that, and if we talk to somebody who's really angry like this, it actually sounds patronizing. It doesn't sound empathic. So if you get somebody on the phone who is elevated like this, you need to be elevated. Not as much as them, but still have some energy in the way that you're responding to them. If somebody is absolutely down in the depths of sadness, at like an 8 out of 10, you come in at a 6 out of 10 of sadness. So you're doing exactly the same thing, or maybe they're -8 and you come at -6, and they come up to -6, we come to -4, and so on. Okay, so that's how we respond empathically. And then the final R is resolution. And when we think about resolution, there are a gazillion ways that we resolve things, but it all basically sits with boundaries. So we're putting in a boundary. So if we did rive instead of river, all we're doing is being kind of nice and supportive. We're actually not helping them to respond to what's happening. So it might be that we say that, but this is where we put in the strategies that we know we need to help them. So we do all of the emotion stuff, and then we say, I can hear that this is really hard for you, but actually what I need to do is to refer you to somebody else. And they're much more likely to respond to that because their emotional needs have been met. We've supported them, and then we're putting a boundary in place. Now I'm going to give you Neuroscience 101 at this point in time, and the reason that we have to do it in this order is because of this. In our brains, we have our medial prefrontal cortex, which is the higher order thinking part of our brain, and then there's lots of different bits, but relevant for this, and then we have our emotion center and our amygdala kind of down here, prefrontal cortex up here. You cannot have your prefrontal cortex on and your emotional center on at the same time. And you can't have them off at the same time. So if your emotion center is on, your higher order thinking is switched off. So we have to meet the emotional needs, and we have to help them. We are calming their emotions, we're just not saying it. We need to bring their emotions down by doing recognize, intimacy, verbalize, and empathy. We bring that down, and as we bring that down, we're bringing up the prefrontal cortex and the higher order thinking. And so when they get to that point, that is when we can do resolution and we can do boundaries. And if you do resolution first, I'm going to tell you, you are literally wasting your breath, because hearing is in the cortex. And so they can't hear what you're saying until you've been able to bring that emotion down and they've raised their prefrontal cortex, and then they can actually start hearing what you're saying, and then they can have a conversation about it. And we do this with children. When we're doing this with little kids, we need to sit in that space of empathy and verbalizing and intimacy for as long as it takes. And with children, it usually takes 4 or 5 times of going for the emotion word in order for them to start to calm and hear. With teenagers and adults, it's much quicker, generally speaking. But what we need to do is to keep an eye on what is happening with the other person. And so with children, little kids, it's often quite easy, because what they'll do is they're sitting there and they might do that big sigh. When they've done the big sigh, that's an indication that they're getting ready and that they're feeling. Dan Siegel has a beautiful term, which is feeling felt. We all need to feel felt. So when they go, or maybe they move a bit, that's an indication that they're feeling felt. And we can move to resolution or putting in the boundary, which might be something like, I see how angry you are, but it's not okay to hit your brother. Okay, so that's the boundary. That's it. Next time, so we say that, next time when your brother really annoys you, what are you going to do differently? But you can't have that conversation until this part has happened, okay? Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. So this is the absolute key to counselling, to supporting people. And can I tell you, I facilitate training and I train practitioners, social workers, psychologists, welfare workers, and they do not know this. But this is absolutely key to the work. So those of you who are students and are young and are setting out, this is right at the very beginning of your careers, and you're going to take this through. But those of us who are, you know, my age, retirement age, I didn't know about this until about 20 years ago, which is when it sort of became out. So, but now there is actually no excuse for us to not be doing this when we're in this. It's like ambulance, you know, paramedics, police, lawyers even, emergency doctors, nurses, you know, anybody who's in the helping professions needs to know this and needs to be able to do this.
This is also very relevant to the neurodiverse population.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about neurodiversity, being a parent, I'm a neurodiverse kid, they are not going to cope with us saying, I can see how sad you are, I can see how upset you are. They're just not going to do. So when you're working with a kid who's neurodiverse or an adult who's neurodiverse, you're not doing the eye contact, because that can often be very threatening for them. It's very often side to side, and it's like, oh, I get you're really annoyed about that. I can, oh, wow, that sucks. I can see how sad you are about that. And you might just do it the once, okay? For kids who are neurodiverse, because that one-on-one intense intimacy is quite difficult for them. So we choose a way to be intimate with them that works for them, not for us, for them. And it took me a long time to learn that as a parent of a child who had a neurodiversity. All right, we're not going to do this role play, because what we're going to do is some role plays next week. But what I do want to finish with is talking about us for today. I want to talk about the importance of well-being for us as a workforce. Whether you're volunteers or paid, it makes no difference. We have to look after you. And so there's lots of things in this word cloud. So we've got friends, we've got supervision, we've got yoga, we've got going to the gym, we've got having pets, taking them for a walk, Pilates, we've got drinking cups of tea. In fact, this is one of my key phrases. There is nothing as healing as a cup of tea. Like when somebody is really distressed and it's like, can I make you a cup of tea? And then it's like something about the warm drink and just sitting with somebody and, you know. So it's like being in nature, or it's boxing, or it's running. But there's all of these things. So what I want you to do is I want you to leave here today with a commitment. We're not going to go around the room because we don't have time to do this, but I want you to leave here today thinking about what is one self-care activity I can do this week to look after myself, and I'm going to ask you to do it, and next week I'm going to ask you if you did do it, okay? Because that is essential. Me, I am the queen of self-care. So when I was young, when I was very new in this, I did experience a vicarious trauma moment, and I committed to having facials like once a month or once every 6 weeks. Now I have a massage a week, once a week massage. I had one yesterday. So because I've been in this sector for so long, I really need to look after myself, and I am committed, even though I'm retired from permanent work, to building up this sector. And if I'm building up this sector, I have to look after me. And it is not selfish. Because when we look after us, we look after everybody else. So I'm going to finish with this little video. Really?
Still here.
When we found that video, we played it in our office, and we were just like watching it. And then when it finished, we turned around and there was all of these people, our colleagues, standing behind us. And they'd walked past the door and they'd heard it, and they'd all just come in, and we were just silent watching it and just like, And I've watched that video hundreds and hundreds of times, and every time I'm just like, I just feel settled. So there's a lot that we've done today, and there's a lot that we haven't done today. There's more to be done, which we're going to do next week, and we're going to talk about tough conversations next week. But we're going to we'll do a bit more about this stuff. We're going to have different role plays of different conversations. Are there any questions before we finish up? What I've put on this, I just put up an extra piece of white butcher's paper with some resources on it. I talked about Kent Hoffman, and I talked about every person you will ever meet has infinite worth. On YouTube, if you look for Kent Hoffman and infinite worth, there is like a 25-minute TED talk that he's done about it. And if we had time, I'd show it to you, but we don't have time, so I'm going to say just go and watch that, because it's fantastic. And then these are the books that I've written, because some of you were asking about them. So the first book I wrote, was it was a compilation book called Whispers of Resilience, Our Stories of Multiple Sclerosis. So my story is in that book. And then I wrote Bugger Bugger Shit, My Quest for Resilience. I just need to explain the title to you. That is a phrase we used in our family since my brother, who's now in his 50s, was about 3 or 4 years old. And it relates to a phone call that my mum had from somebody telling her that the plane my dad was on had crashed, except he had missed his flight. And I had got the phone call as a 6-year-old or something, and I forgot to tell mum. And so she's on the end of the phone, and this person's giving her this information, and she's Welsh, and they use the term bugger in Welsh quite a lot, Anyway, she goes, bugger. And then she heard some more, and she was like, bugger. And then she went, shit. Anyway, she put the phone down, and we were like, what's wrong? And she said, oh, the plane your dad's on has crashed. And then I went, oh no, it hasn't, he missed his flight, blah, blah, blah. My brother then went, oh, bugger shit. And so in our family, that phrase is used for really, really bad stuff. So there has been a lot of bad stuff that has happened in my life. And so I decided to call the book Bugger Bugger Shit, but My Quest for Resilience. It is all about how we can all build resilience. It's on Amazon if you want it, so some other bookstores. I've just written a book called The Anatomy of Domestic Violence, Emily's Story, which is going to be launched in May at Lead, along with their coercive control video. And that is a deep dive into one woman's story of horrific domestic violence, but it's not horrific to read because I've intertwined it with our reflections on society and how it all kind of happened. So those are my kind of 3 things, and then the Kent Hoffman book. And then also what I mentioned was the John Gottman book, Raising an Emotionally Intelligent Child.
Of criminal law, family law, immigration law, conveyancing, and employment matters, please contact Tarandeep Singh on 0470 412 600.